So welcome, everyone. My name is Felice Stonestrom, and I am the manager for the community programs here at Packard Children's Hospital, Stanford. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. So Dr. Rafael Pelayo is a clinical professor at Stanford University School of Medicine. He has specialized in the treatment of sleep disorders in children and adults since 1993 and has lectured nationally and internationally on sleep disorders. He's given multiple television, radio, and print interviews. He is currently helping to teach the Stanford Sleep and Dreams undergraduate course with Dr. William Dement. Together, they've co-authored the course textbook entitled Dement's Sleep and Dreams. Dr. Pelayo is originally from New York City, where he attended medical school and completed a residency in child neurology. He has served as chair of the Sleep Disorders Research Advisory Board of the National Center for Sleep Disorders Research at the National Heart, Lung, Blood Institute at the National Institutes of Health, and has chaired the Pediatric Special Interest section of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. Dr. Pelayo's talk tonight is titled Sleepless in Silicon Valley. So please join me in welcoming our speaker.
So we're going to talk about sleep, and I was going to focus on infants and young children. And some people are walking in, that's fine. You know, there are a couple of babies here. If they cry, I don't mind if your babies cry. So it's okay. You know, I think crying babies bother the parents more than I think other people. It's not such a big deal to me. So don't worry. Don't get stressed out if their babies are crying. It's okay. I can always speak louder and repeat whatever I have to say. When I was thinking about this talk, I was anticipating I was going to be seeing a lot of moms with newborns. And instead I'm seeing a lot of people who are expecting, which I think is interesting because that's going to make me think now a little bit differently about the talk, because you guys are now kind of anticipating what to do. It's kind of a preventive mode. And I'm wondering what kind of people would come to a talk before the problem arises. So I'm kind of curious about who you guys are a little bit, and I guess we'll talk more. Maybe you guys have your own sleep issues that are influencing your decision to come here tonight. Maybe. We'll see. You were told by Felice that I work with adults and kids. What I like to do is focus on how families sleep. I think of myself as doing family sleep medicine. I trained in child neurology, so I'm trained as a pediatrician and as a neurologist. I trained in child neurology, but my sole focus was to do sleep medicine as a medical student. And even though I'm a child neurologist, I work in the Department of Psychiatry, mostly with adult patients. So I'm a child neurologist working with adults in a psychiatry department for the most part. And I like it that way. And hopefully it'll be clear to you guys. Anyway, let's start. So now that some of you are going to be having a baby, some of you that have a baby, right? Now that you will be having or have a baby, do you really want to sleep like a baby? I don't know how many times you've said that phrase, slept like a baby, right? How many of you maybe said that before, heard people say he slept like a baby last night? Really, I'm on a mission to get rid of that because that makes no sense. I mean, you don't really want to sleep. Do you really want to sleep like a baby? Okay. I mean, babies sleep okay, but they're not the best sleepers. You want to be incontinent. You want to be fed every 2 to 4 hours. Wear a diaper. I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, to want to sleep like a baby. The reason people say that they slept like a baby is because they're hard to wake up once they're asleep. Okay, and that's where that comes from. There's something called an arousal threshold. And I'm just starting, guys. Please make us welcome you. And I saw the baby came in. The baby seemed to have been sequestered up there. That's not necessary. If they want to have a little play date, that's cool. But I don't mind if the kids play and talk. It's fine. But I was saying, we use this phrase, sleep like a baby. And the reason people say this is because babies sleep very deeply. And all of you, before you were ever parents, before you ever thought you'd ever have kids, maybe. Some of you are thinking, I can't believe this is happening to me. I can't believe I've done this, right? Even before you ever thought about becoming a parent, you must have noticed little kids, babies, going to the movies with people, right? Some R-rated movie, and you see somebody walking in with a baby in their arms, or some concert, and you go, that's ridiculous, so inappropriate, right? And we're quick to judge other people sometimes, like, oh, would they do this? And the thing is, the babies sleep through all that noise, right? And the thing with babies is they have a very, very, very high arousal threshold. And the arousal threshold means how much stimulation you need to wake somebody up. If you take a step back and think, what is sleep to begin with? Sleep, by definition, must be rapidly reversible, right? Think about the difference between being awake and being asleep, right? Biological, natural states And you must be able to reverse sleep immediately, because nothing is more dangerous to an individual than to be asleep. Sleeping people can be attacked at any point, right? You're vulnerable while you're sleeping. So you have to have this biological state that puts you at risk of being attacked. So whatever sleeps function or functions with an SS4 are so important, you put yourself at risk of being attacked while you're doing it, right? So at the same time, you have to be able to protect yourself while you're sleeping. So we sleep on this hair trigger to be able to reverse it immediately, right? You should be able, at a moment's notice, somebody yells fire, get up, figure out what's going on, and go from dreaming in this fantastic world you may have been in to reality, immediately take care of the problem, right? So there's something called the arousal threshold. How much stimulation you need to go from sleeping to the awake world? Well, babies have a very high arousal threshold. How high? Well, if it's just by pure noise, to wake up a sleeping baby is about 110 decibels, about a jet engine to wake up a sleeping baby, okay? At the same time, I talk to parents of newborns who, when the baby's napping, they won't flush the toilet because they're scared it's going to wake up the baby, okay? And that becomes an issue, creeping around, don't disturb baby. Because what the reality is, when you become a parent, I think you can argue whether it's the most significant thing you've ever done in your life, right? The most rewarding experience. You can quibble about what's the most rewarding experience of your life. And people, when they look back, you know, oh, having kids was really important. People look back and they debate that. Should I have done it again? It's something that people always think about, right? Should I have done it, or what was going on, and how rewarding it was to become a parent. But there's no debate. It's the most impractical thing you've ever done to yourself, right? Being a parent is very impractical. Think about how much time it took to make a baby and the investment of time now that you're going into right now, right? 18, 19, 21 years, thousands of dollars are going to be spent, right? It's ridiculous, right, when you think about what goes on. And the truth is that the only chance a parent gets to go back to the lifestyle before they were parents is when the baby's sleeping, right? So there's a lot of pressure to get to sleep. And I met a lot of young couples, people who decide, well, you know, when's the right time to have this baby? And they plan it. And they say, well, okay, well, I'm working on my graduate degree, classes are over, I'll have the baby, I'll go through pregnancy while I'm writing my thesis. When the baby's napping, and then the baby's born, but they haven't finished the thesis. Well, I'm going to finish up my work when the baby naps, right? And there's all this pressure to do these things that go on. And some people do it, and some people don't, right? But it is a very interesting thing what becoming a parent is, right? It's a very different thing. And those of you who have never had kids, right? All your friends who have kids want you to have kids, right? It's kind of the thing about like misery wants company that you tell everybody, right? And also when you've argued with your own parents as a teenager, your parents at some point say, well, wait till you have yours and see what it's like, right? Then you'll appreciate. And your relationship with your own parents is going to change as you become parents. So a lot of dynamics change. A lot of things are happening. And it's all influenced by sleep to some degree. Because forget about children for a second. Just talk about sleep in general. If you don't get enough sleep, the first thing affected by lack of sleep is that we're irritable. Lack of sleep is involved in regulation of emotions, by the way. Functions of sleep, I don't know why we sleep. One of the things that sleep apparently does, it helps with memory and helps regulate our emotions. It resets our emotions. Most mood disorders, people with depression, manic depressive conditions, have problems with their sleep. So sleep at a biological level has something to do with how emotions are regulated. And certainly if you don't get enough sleep, you tend to be more labile. Right? You get a little more irritable, right? You get cranky, right? And what I tend to see is when people come in and not getting enough sleep, if you don't get enough sleep in general, first you get a little bit irritable. Later, you kind of get forgetful, absent-minded when you're not getting enough sleep. The last thing affected is your motor performance. So you can drive in a kind of annoyed, distracted way, okay? But you're not at your best. And you get short with each other. And when somebody's not sleeping, it becomes whose fault is it that I'm not sleeping, right? And why am I not sleeping? And then you feel weird about blaming your child. I'm not sleeping well because of my child. And then you feel weird about the situation. Or one of you may feel that you're better at putting the kid to sleep than the other. And this becomes a tension between the couple sometimes. And this dynamic goes on. Nobody comes to see me if they're happy with their kid and everything is perfect, right? They don't take time to do this. So we see these dynamics. But the reality is that most of the kids do well. So you don't really want to sleep like a baby, okay? And I'll talk to you about what better sleep is later, but when somebody says he or she won't sleep, what goes through your mind? What goes through your pediatrician's mind, by the way? Many of you are maybe picking your doctor, have not quite picked it yet, I'm not sure who you're going to be working with, right? But one of the things you'll be citing is, what do you think your pediatrician's training is in sleep? Very little, okay? People are taught very little about sleep in medical school. It's just not part of the regular curriculum. So not much is taught. And what will happen is that inevitably, the pediatricians will tell you whatever makes sense to them. They just apply logic. A lot of times pediatricians are kind of reassuring you. And I trained in pediatrics. I was at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, Babies Hospital in New York. I, by the way, am from New York. I got to deliver a baby with my mother's obstetrician. Think about that. I delivered a baby with my mother's obstetrician. The guy who delivered me, I delivered a baby with him. Okay? So it's a hard thing to do in New York City, but it happened with me. It's just coincidence. My first night on call, I got called in to help with the delivery, and it was a guy who delivered me in Manhattan, of all places. But your doctors aren't really taught much about sleep. And I remember when I was going to internship, somebody asked, what are the advice the sage, older physician told us was, once the kid is sleeping, to the parents to not look at the kid. Because once the kid is asleep, if the parents look at the kid, they won't know what to do. The kids will do all these things, they won't know what's going on. And it's just best for the parents to ignore the child once the child is sleeping. So the first advice I got was, I already knew I was going to go into a sleep career, but the first thing somebody told me was just ignore the kids when they're sleeping, which I think is a horrible idea. Don't do that, okay? But that was where pediatrics was at in the 80s, right? Early 90s. I think in 1998, they surveyed pediatricians on average got 2 hours total training on sleep. 2 hours total out of a 3-year residency. 2 hours total of lectures and sleep. So who do you turn to get advice for sleep? Well, most people rely on their grandparents, if they're around, but they're not always around. Especially here in Silicon Valley, grandparents aren't around, okay? And usually when I see couples come in with children, little kids, 2, 3, 4-month-old kids coming in, almost always the grandparents aren't around, because often the grandparents take on that role in a lot of families, or they're not getting along with the grandparents, or they live a long distance, but usually there's another role for this. So what people do now, especially now that we have very educated people, sophisticated population, they read books. Any of you have any advice books yet? Raise your hands if you have an advice book. Okay, right. And how many of you have more than one advice book? A few of you, right? You get them as shower presents, right? You know, what to expect and whatever, and all these different books, right? If you go to the self-help section for babies, there are going to be books on sleep. And I've been asked more than once if I would write a book, and I never wanted to, partly because I'm lazy, I guess. But the reality is that one thing that will happen is every book on sleep contradicts the other book. The books don't agree. Why? Because it's the nature of publishing. You cannot get a book published if it agrees with what's already been published. So the publisher will ask you, what's different about your book than what's already out there? So every book touts itself to be the one with the science and the secrets and the tips. Right? Every book contradicts itself. The first book on sleep, some of you may have a book by a guy named Richard Ferber, Solve Your Child's Sleep Problems, Richard Ferber. If you know that name, he was one of the first guys to do a book on sleep, and he still published his book out there. And he's the one who talked about leaving the kids alone and so-called crying it out. Then there's the other book out there called Attachment Parenting, William Sears. Some of you heard of William Sears, where basically you never let the child cry for any reason at all, right? And you always keep those kids. And I've been with Sears, and I've been in a debate with Ferber. I mean, I've been able to meet these people. There's a no-cry sleep solution. So I'm sure there's some other ones out there that are more recent. I've stopped looking. But all the books contradict themselves, right? And all the books, what really are based on is the experience of that person who wrote it, explaining their own experience. Because nobody has 50,000 children who've been normal, healthy babies that somebody have volunteered. How many of you like to volunteer your babies for health science? One, okay, because you're a scientist yourself, maybe? That's why. Good man, okay. We did research on my first child, too. But who volunteers their kids for research, right? This comes down to a very simple thing. Tonight, some baby in this hospital is going to get a spinal tap. Spinal taps are a routine procedure, sound awful, but it's actually a medical student procedure. Medical students are taught how to do spinal taps, especially on babies. You can fold them, easy to get into space. So spinal taps are considered routine procedures on babies, not dangerous at all. But all the data on what is abnormal and normal is based on kids that were sick. Those are the abnormal values, and whatever's left over were the kids who weren't sick, and therefore those are normal. We never did spinal taps on normal kids because nobody volunteered the normal kids for spinal taps. All we know is what were the results of the kids that turned out to be sick later, and that's how we have norms, right? And that's how that works. So the reason I'm telling you this is because a lot of things you get is anecdotal, a lot of experience, right? So I'll do the same. I'll tell you my experience with my kids, okay? How do I become a sleep expert at Stanford? Well, you hear my credentials. I was trained in child neurology, specifically to get into sleep. I picked pediatrics and neurology as I thought an easy pathway to get into sleep medicine. That was my goal as a medical student, to be a sleep doctor. So I chose child neurology thinking that would be the way to get into it. Thinking always I would take care of adults and kids. So once I'm at Stanford with child neurology, and once I have started my training and finished my training, I still don't have any kids. But I'm now the expert, and I have no kids, right? And it's a very common thing. I don't know if there's any physician, or at least there's one physician I met, but any other physicians here tonight. If you do pediatrics, parents will always ask you what may seem an unfair question, but parents often will ask their doctors, do you have any kids of your own? Right? This is a very common thing to say because you want to know whether they have that perspective, right? And then you may also ask your doctor, I've been asked this, and you may have asked yourself, what would you do if this was your own child, right? Again, it's the same interesting dynamic of how do we deal with people, right? You know, the humanity part of medicine. So it was 1993, 94 when I finished. When I got here, and I didn't have any kids, and I was already giving people advice on how to take care of their kids and what was going on. So my wife's also a physician, and she had a baby, right? We had a baby together, and we had a daughter. And at this point, I was thinking, especially if you know we're in Silicon Valley in the early 90s, this was like the oil boom here. The internet was taking off. Everybody was getting rich, right? Everywhere you saw, people were getting rich. You know, the story was the janitor had stock options somewhere, and now was a multi-million driving a Bentley, right? Those were like the local stories here at that point in the early 90s. I was thinking, all this stuff's happening around me. How am I going to make my millions? And when my daughter came along, Monica, that's her, I thought I would do everything you're not supposed to do on purpose. So if you come to my house, okay, not tonight, but if you come to my house, you'll see on the, when you walk in, the first thing you'll see are the brainwave tracings of my daughter when she's 5 weeks old, when she's dreaming. So I have tracings of my daughter dreaming. Actually, she's 5 months old. I apologize, 5 months old dreaming. But what happened was when she came along, the main guy talking about sleeping kids, the main advice guy was a guy named Richard Ferber. And Ferber said that the misconception that people have, people always talk about sleeping through the night. Right? What does sleeping through the night mean? It means the baby did not bother the parents. That's all it means. It's all it means. It really is, right? So because if the baby wakes up 3 times, rolls over and goes back to sleep, and you don't know about it, in the morning, what are you going to say? Good baby, right? Great baby. And by reflection, what a good parent I am, right? Sleeping through the night means the baby did not disturb the parents, right? So the reality of sleeping through the night is based on the parent's arousal threshold, right? If you're a light sleeper, you'll say the baby wakes up very often. If you're a very deep sleeper, you might say the baby barely wakes up, right? And that's the reality, because no baby will sleep 8 hours in a row. Never have, never will. Newborns sleep only 60 minutes at a time. We'll talk more about the science of this later on. But the normal sleep cycle is only 60 minutes. Every 60 minutes, all babies open their eyes, look around, make sure everything's okay, and they go back to sleep. Stay up with them, watch. Okay, put an infrared camera. A baby will never sleep through the night without waking up, okay? And neither will you as an adult, by the way. Humans wake up about every 90 minutes. Every 90 minutes, all of you open your eyes, make sure everything's okay, and you go back to sleep. If it really is true that sleeping animals are in danger of being attacked, if we slept 8 hours in a row in our distant past, the lions would have figured out to eat us at 3 o'clock in the morning, get us out of the caves, right? Humans wake up about every 90 minutes. We all do. Okay? And every 90 minutes, you open your eyes for a few seconds, roll over, nothing has changed, and you go right back to sleep. None of you sleep 8 hours in a row, and your babies aren't going to sleep 8 hours in a row either. They're all going to wake up about every hour. The question is the baby going to go back to sleep without your help or not? That's the only situation that it really is at hand right now. Okay? So waking up is normal. What's abnormal, if abnormal is the right term, what's difficult, is perhaps a better term, is how to get this child to go back to sleep without your assistance. And some people don't mind. I enjoy being with the baby. And some will say, no, I need a break. It all depends on your own sleep issue. Right? The first decision you make as a parent is, where's that child going to sleep? Right? You bring him home from the hospital, where's the child going to sleep? In bed with us, next to us, in a separate room, somewhere in between? It might change, right? Or with another relative or with another child, right? So the idea with Ferber, when he did his work, was he had actually video cameras in the nursery, in the crib where the baby was, and saw babies waking up. And some babies wake up and cried, and some babies woke up, sucked their thumbs, and rolled over. But they were all waking up. And that came up with a concept that babies learn how to sleep. Sleeping is a learned behavior, and some babies soothe better than others, and that's what was happening. But they were all waking up. So The idea that Ferber espoused was that the baby has to learn to fall asleep. And the way they do that is whatever the conditions are before they fall asleep will be the ones they find themselves in later. So for example, if they are being rocked to sleep, right? And they fall asleep in your arms and you put them down in the crib, when they wake up later, they're not being rocked. They say something is wrong and I should notify somebody and I'm going to cry, right? Or if I'm nursed to sleep, I fall asleep in my mother's arms, I'm drinking milk, and then when I wake up an hour or 2 hours later, that's not there, I should notify you. So the idea behind Ferber was simply to put the baby in the crib while they were drowsy and let them fall asleep on their own, so they learn to sleep on their own, and that's how you solve this issue. And because you're going to let them sleep on their own, and let them work it out on their own, that's why you would ignore their crying. And there was the concept of crying out that many of you have heard about. And that was Richard Ferber. That was state-of-the-art pediatric sleep medicine in 1993 when my daughter was born, 1995 when my daughter was born, okay? So I thought, okay, well, that's what we're supposed to do. What if you do the opposite? So Monica came along. On purpose, I'd have her sleep in bed with us, and after she was sleeping with us, I'd pick her up and put her in her crib in her room. She slept fine. Sometimes she'd be sleeping in a crib. I'd bring her into our bed. She slept fine. She'd be sleeping. I would poke her. She'd open her eyes, look at me, go back to sleep fine. I'd rock her to sleep, put her in her bed. She slept fine. No matter what I did, this kid slept fine. And she was sleeping through the night, not having any more feedings by the time she was 8 weeks old. True situation. My daughter. What am I thinking? I'm good, right? Okay? I'm a sleep doctor, you know? This is my calling, okay? And the irony was that when I applied for the job here, I was wondering whether there was a role for pediatric sleep doctors. There weren't any. Stanford didn't have a pediatric sleep doctor. I was the first one applying. And I stayed at a friend's house in Woodside, and the mother had a newborn. And they put the baby in the living room with me that night. And the kid kept crying. About every hour and a half, the kid would cry. I'd look at this kid, and he'd cry some more, and then he'd fall back asleep. And they were like, it was brutal. I'm like, okay, this is evil. I'll have an interview tomorrow to talk about a job and sleep, and this kid's waking me up at night, right? I thought that was so weird. And what was eye-opening for me was in the morning when dawn was coming through, because I'm not sleeping well. I'm in a couch in a house I've never been in before. This kid is crying next to me. When dawn started breaking through, the mom came in, swept up the kid, boom, took her to her room, to nurse, I guess. In the morning over breakfast, I said, wow, that kid woke up a lot of times. And the mother got mad at me saying he never cried. He said he never cried at all. He's just saying that. And I'm like, whoa, that's really weird. She never came to get the kid because she was a bad mom. She never heard the kid crying. I heard the kid crying. The kid was right next to me. But she was in another room, never heard the kid cry. So in her mind, that kid slept through the night. It was a good baby to me. When I thought, this kid, I'm going to kill it, right? This is evil, right? So that was my interview. Then I get the job. I get my own daughter, and she sleeps through the night. Everything's just fine. I'm like, cool. And then it was going so well that my wife, who's a physician in internal medicine, decides to become a sleep doctor herself. Now my wife is a sleep doctor, and I'm a sleep doctor, and we have our second child, AJ, him. And when he came along, I thought I knew everything at that point. Nothing to worry about, right? And I remember, I don't know how you guys are going to do it when you have your kids, but we wanted to get out of the hospital as soon as we could, right? We had a second child. We had another child at home, okay, 2 years, 8 months. As soon as our son was born, what's the minimum time? We looked at the clock. On the dot, we're walking out of here. We're getting out of here, okay? We want to go home, right? Take the baby home, and my daughter, by the way, had her own room and her own crib. And at that point, by the time she's 2 years, 8 months, we had taken apart that crib, moved it to the next bedroom for our son, and given her a little toddler bed. So our son's in his crib in his room. There's a double drop side. I don't think they make them anymore. Little springs, a double drop side thing. So you have to put that thing up together. When AJ was born, brought him home, that night, he starts to cry. My wife says, he's too far away, because in the bedroom further away. I want him here with us. Can you please bring the crib into our room? I'm like, yes, dear, right? What else are you going to say, right? But the crib doesn't fit through the door, right? Because the crib's too big. So I had to take apart the crib, take it apart, take it to our bedroom, reassemble it, and then put the baby in there. And then the next feeding, he cried again, and my wife says, I can't have the baby in the room. Can you please take the crib out? And I had to, yes, dear, right? What else are you going to say? I disassembled the crib, brought him over to his room again, reassembled it, put him down again. And I'm thinking, don't worry, I got this covered. I know everything about kids and sleep, no problem, okay? And AJ was a pain. He cried all the time. He was really fussy. And now who do I turn to, right? Who do I ask for help? My wife's a sleep doctor, I'm a sleep doctor. Who can I discuss this with? It's embarrassing, right? I'm going to work. I can't tell anybody my kid's not sleeping, right? It's just not cool. Plus, I'm giving advice to the parents about their own kids, and our kids keeping me awake, right? So I remember it was a weekend. He was born 98, so it was in 98 that it happened. And it was, what happened then is one night, he starts to cry. My wife says, I can't deal with this anymore. It's just, my wife is so frustrated too. And I'm like, I'll take care of it. I'm the hero. I'll take care of it. And I take him to his room, and he's like wailing away, wah, wah. And I'm holding him. And I'm thinking, these people are making millions of dollars all around me. Property value is going up. What can I do to make some money? And I'm like, I know what my baby needs is somehow to recreate the effect of being in the womb, because that's what Ferber says, recreate the feeling, right? So if I can somehow put him in a stack of warm water upside down and give him some oxygen, he might sleep better. And I remember thinking this. And it made sense to me at the time, because I was in my sleep-deprived, irrational state. I'm like, if I could get him upside down, how do I do it? And I'm like, how do I do it? Because he kept crying, and I kept thinking about how to put him upside down in a bag of water somehow, and getting him warm and making him uncomfortable. He would like that. And in the midst of that evening, I remember that I bought a CD, and it was Bob Dylan had a new CD out at the time called "Time Out of Mind." He got the Emmy for it, "Time Out of Mind." And I grabbed that CD, I popped it in, and the kid stopped crying immediately. And I was like, that's so weird. So now my wheel starts spinning in the opposite direction. What is it about Bob Dylan's voice that made this kid fall asleep? There must be something about the frequencies he's singing at that are sinking into his brain waves to make him sleep better. I must contact Bob Dylan. He must make a children's album. This is what we need to do. We have found it. And I remember thinking, this is true. Thinking this, and like, this is crazy. But what really happened, I realized, was that when I put on the album, I started kind of moving to the music a little bit in our arm, and I calmed me down. And when I calm myself down, the kid calmed down. And I think that's what really did it. So what I learned from that is I think really when your kids start crying, don't think of it as a problem that you have to fix, right? Just be first glad you even have a baby that's crying, okay? A lot of people don't never have that situation, okay? And just calm yourself down. This is something you learn in medicine, that whenever you go to cardiac arrest, first take your own pulse, right? You getting panicky is not going to help you take care of somebody else who's crashing. You getting upset is not going to help the kid sleep any better. Okay, let's just switch slides because, so this is a common concept that sleeping impacts behavior, and the way when kids don't sleep well, it mimics other learning issues. We see this a lot with the older kids. But I think I've learned the most about working with children when pediatricians bring me their kids. When a pediatrician brings you their kids, you know that they're really frustrated. And I've noticed something that helps me think a little bit how to handle these kids. When you travel. Think about this when you guys go on airplanes. Anybody plan on taking, once your baby's born, taking a trip with a baby? Right? Oh, look at all the hands raised. A third of you, I'm taking a trip with a baby, right? Imagine the fun you're going to have traveling with your baby, okay? Okay, what's that's going to be like? Think back to when you weren't a parent, okay? In another time, when you got on a plane and you boarded the plane and there was an empty seat next to you. What was best case scenario? For the seat to remain empty. What's worst case scenario? Crying baby, right? Nobody wants to sit next to a crying baby, okay? Now you're sitting with that empty seat. Now imagine you're the parent who missed the pre-boarding. I think that's why they pre-board anyway, to avoid this. They missed the pre-boarding, coming down the aisle. The smaller the baby, the more things you carry, right? Coming down the aisle, traveling by themselves. And I'll say mom, it could be mom or dad, but it's typically the mom who's doing this. Coming down the aisle, carrying the diaper, all stuff with the baby, hoping that the person she sits next to, because she's going to be a lap child, is not some sick, demented person who's not ill with a fever, is going to get my kid sick, who's a nice person, who's okay with kids, hoping it's like, Mrs. Doubtfire you're going to sit next to. That's what you're hoping you're going to be sitting next to, right? Somebody really nice, not somebody evil, right? And as you come down the aisle, what happens is everybody who sees this mother coming down the aisle with a baby, when they see the mother coming down the aisle, they look away. If you have an empty seat, you don't want to make eye contact with this person, right? Because they have a kid. As they come down the aisle, the tension builds on the plane because now there's tension here, right? Where's this kid going to sit, right? And there's less and less empty seats, and the tension builds. And people think that magically, if I make eye contact, somehow her seat will be assigned to me, right? You don't want that, right? Right? So as they come down the aisle, the tension builds. And what will happen, this happens all the time. Watch when this happens on planes. The baby starts to cry. The baby starts to cry coming down the aisle. Now all eyes dart on the mom. What are you going to do about it? Baby's crying. Now the mom has to console this baby as she's looking for her seat and harassed by traveling. Starts shaking the baby like it's a maraca, right? And the baby still cries, right? What usually happens in that scenario, watch what happens next. A complete stranger, often the flight attendant, asks to hold the baby. The flight attendant holds the baby and the baby stops crying. And the obvious question is, how did a stranger console that baby faster than the mother? It's obvious. The flight attendant flies every day, no tension, no big deal. They do this all the time. Happy to be holding a baby, right? It's so cool to hold a newborn, right? You don't get to do it every day, right? It's kind of fun to do that. And the kid comes down, and then the mom's kind of embarrassed and gets her seat. Happens all the time. Now, I have told this vignette many, many times. I've told it here more than once. And a few years ago, I gave this talk right here, and it turned out one of my neighbors, I didn't know this, had come to the talk. And she told me later that after the talk, she took a flight to Oklahoma. And sure enough, this happened. The baby started crying. And the baby kept crying so much when the flight took off. Baby kept crying. Once the plane had balanced out, the pilot came out. It was a female pilot. And said, "Where's that baby?" And the pilot took the baby. Baby stopped crying. People in the plane started clapping. The mother felt so embarrassed, right? And then they handed the baby back to the mother, because the pilot has to fly the plane, and the baby started crying again. So this happens, okay? But think about this, okay? Don't get stressed out by your baby crying, because that's the first thing, right? The first thing is what's wrong. Remember, waking up is normal. If they don't wake up, it'd be weird. They're supposed to wake up. So don't get upset about something that's normal. And then by you getting more upset about it, it becomes more of an issue, and they feed up on each other, right? So you really got to calm yourself down a little bit, okay? And look at the big picture, because they're going to get over it, okay? What are they crying about anyway? They have food, everything's fine, right? Unless they have a fever or something, If they're healthy, everything's okay, just let them be. Or at least sleep medicine, right? I like this photo because it's such a ridiculous photo. Nobody does that. Who's going to sit at the back of the kid's neck, right? You usually look at their face. It looks such an obvious stock photo. You would never do that. Let's look at some mark. The kid has a little tattoo back there. You're wondering, right? Why would you do that? I'll let you know a little bit, just to get a general sense of how we get kids to sleep. We do sleep studies. We do sleep medicine. We do sleep studies. How do we get kids to sleep at a sleep lab? Have you ever seen photos of what it's like to have a sleep study? Some of you may have had sleep studies yourselves. Put wires on your head, on your face with glue. Chest, legs, arms, wire you up completely. Put you in a bed you've never been in with a camera until you go to sleep. People do it every night, okay? Every night, and they're doing it right now, right? Right now we're doing sleep studies. So how do we get the kids to sleep? Parents often will ask, what do you give them to sleep? How do you sedate them? We don't have to sedate them. Getting kids to sleep is very, very easy. What I tell the kids, if let's say they're 3 or 4, remember this. One of the cool things about having a toddler is they have magical thinking, right? You're everything to them, and they have magical thinking, right? You can impose all your fears, superstitions, everything into your kids, whatever you want, because they have magical thinking. They believe you, okay? All your beliefs, all your culture, you're going to pour it right into them, okay? So little kids have magical thinking. So what I tell, see a little kid, spend the night, I'm saying, listen, sleeping at home and sleeping at the sleep lab is the same. There's only 2 differences. Same rules at home or the same rules here. So if you can jump on the bed with your shoes on at home, you can jump on our bed with your shoes on too. And the kids, no, I can't jump on my bed with my shoes on the bed. No, we can't do it here either then, okay? But there's only 2 differences. One is they're going to decorate your body with pure gold. And the kids' eyes go like, what? Like pure gold, because the leads are pure gold, 24 karat gold. And they says, what's gold like? And you've heard of, because they've heard of gold, right? It's on movies, cartoons, they talk about gold. And say, have you ever seen real gold? And maybe your parents have some jewelry. And I get the sensors out, I show them. They're round, they're shiny, and they're pure gold. It goes, we're going to decorate your body with pure gold. And they're already thinking that's so weird, okay? We're going to put your hair, pure gold everywhere. And second, we have no bedtimes, which is true. We tell the kids there's no bedtimes. Says, that's your bed, that's your TV, you have a phone, you want to get some food delivered, some pizza, some Chinese food delivered, no problem, just call up, okay? You go to bed whenever you want. At home, there's a bedtime. Here, there is no bedtime. Stay up as late as you like. Now the kids are looking at you like, really? The kids are now asking, when can they stay? They start like, when can they do it? Because there is no bedtime. Stay up as late as you like. We don't care what time you go to bed. Stay up as late as you like. And that's what happens is because with these kids, let's say they fall asleep, a toddler falls asleep at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. You let them stay up as late as they like, maybe 10:30. Boom, then they're so out of it. And their arousal threshold is still so high, you can do anything to them. You can put wires on them, you can move them, change positions, right? You'll see you can do anything to these kids after an hour and a half or so. So a lot of times, the trick to getting kids to sleep better is we give them a later bedtime. Parents often think it's such a hassle to get my kid to sleep. I got to start the routine early. Because they view taking care of this child not as a loving interaction, but as a chore to be accomplished. And putting your kids to sleep should not be a chore, right? It's something you get to do. Not that you have to go to sleep, it's that you get to go to sleep. It's a luxury, right? It's a different way of thinking. Because if you get stressed about this, if getting the kid to sleep is a hassle and a chore, like throwing out the garbage, then you argue as a couple whose turn is it to do it tonight, of course the kid's not going to sleep too well, right? So you got to change how you think about these things. this is so common. This is National Sleep Foundation, 2004, the third bullet. When parents in general are asked, is there anything you want to change about your child? 76% of them said, the way my kid sleeps. One of the most common things parents say about if they could change anything about their lives, right? They said, the way my kid sleeps. It's one of the most common things people complain about. So these are the different sleep disorders that we deal with. Talk about normal sleep, insomnia, sleep apnea. Parasomnias are things like sleepwalking, sleep terrors, confusional arousals, restless legs, kids, narcolepsy, and delayed sleep phase is more of in teenagers. But all of these are pediatric conditions. Why did I put normal sleep as a condition that we deal with? Because sleep is very relative. One of the things when you deal with your pediatricians, when you start seeing pediatricians, those of you who will be picking a pediatrician, one of the things that they always do when pediatricians talk to each other, there's a pediatrician lingo that they use, and it always begins with a birth history. Pediatrician will say, this 4-month-old born to a gravida 2, para 1 mother, right? They always have this thing. They always start off with the birth history. That's how they describe a child to each other. But the birth history and then moving on forward. Since the kid was born, what happened? But I think, and what I try to teach the people that I work with, is if you try to evaluate a child's sleep, a 2-month-old or 18-year-old, starting with when the kid was born, you started too late. I really think you need to get a history of how the parents slept before they were parents, right? Because that influences how that baby's going to sleep. For example, you may have a baby that sleeps 6 hours a night, okay? Or let's say a baby sleeps 7 hours at night. Baby sleeps 7 hours at night, born to a mother who, before she was ever a mom, used to sleep 6.5. She was in the habit of sleeping 6.5 hours, and her baby sleeps 7 hours. She'll tell all her friends what a great baby she is, by reflection what a good mother she is. She gives advice to all the other parents on how to raise their kids. She's the queen of the new mothers group because she gets the kid to sleep well because she only sleeps 6.5 and her baby sleeps 7 hours. Take that same 7-hour sleeping baby born to a mother who likes to sleep 8.5 hours, she'll bitterly complain to her friends how horrible it is and the kid waking her up, right? Same 7-hour sleeping baby. So we need to get a sense of how the parents slept beforehand. You may have a parent who had a history of occasional bouts of insomnia before they were ever a parent. And now they're sensitized to what's going to happen. So you may have a parent come in saying, my kid wakes up twice a night and falls back to sleep in 10, 15 minutes. And you go, sounds good. I'm like, no. The problem is I can't go back to sleep afterwards. So I got to get this kid fixed so I can go back to sleep because I can't fall back asleep after he wakes up. So where's the problem? In the child or the mother, right? Or the father, right? Or you may have a dad, I'm not trying to pick a mom, let's imagine a father who had occasional bouts of snoring, has sleep apnea that's not yet been treated, not been recognized, okay? Snoring, right? But so now their sleep is kind of brittle because they snore. You add on top of that brittle snoring sleep, the interruptions of normal parenting, and they really have a problem. Again, they complain about the kid sleeping, when in reality, you got to fix the parent's sleep. Okay, so that's kind of to think a little bit about. So it's a nice time. And I see couples coming in saying, my wife's expecting, I got to get my snoring fixed, right? Have any of you told your partners to get the snoring fixed because you're expecting? No? Some of you are looking around. Okay, I think some of you are guilty. Don't have to raise your hands. Oh, that's a HIPAA thing. I can't ask any questions. We're still recording. I'm sorry. But it's happening, okay? So again, my point is simply, I got to think about how you guys sleep yourself. There's no reason to assume that you guys are great sleepers, right? I think the goal of every parent when they becomes a parent is to be a better parent than their own parents were to them, right? At some point in your life, especially when you went through adolescence, you thought, oh, if I ever have a kid, I'll do this to my kid, right? I was thinking about this today with my 16-year-old. He's going to be 17 soon. I said, when I was your age, I used to argue with my father about how long my hair was. And I promised myself when I have a teenager, I would never tell you to cut your hair, right? You can leave it as long as you want. My kid likes his hair super short. It's like, you know, and I said, I'll never argue with you about music. He doesn't care about music, but we argue about video gaming, which was not an issue for me when I was a kid. So things happen, but you always want to be a better parent than your own parents were to you, right? Because you think about what they did that you wish they hadn't done. Unless you think your parents are perfect. If you think your parents are perfect, then you're screwed, because how can you be a perfect parent, right? Now you're really kind of stuck. So I told you before that babies don't sleep that well. So who are our best sleepers in society? The best sleepers in society, I think, are 8 and 9-year-olds. I want you to think about how an 8 or 9-year-old person sleeps compared to how you sleep yourself and how your babies may be sleeping. Think about how an 8 or 9-year-old person sleeps. Your sleep is a reflection of your life, and your life reflects in the way you sleep. It goes in both directions. Our symbol in sleep medicine is that yin and yang, black and white, daylight cycle. Your sleep is a reflection of your life, and life reflects on how you sleep. So a typical 8 or 9-year-old person, think about coming home from school, coming home from work, right? Come home from school. the kid has a little snack, they have to start their homework. They think they have lots of homework, they really don't, right? But when you're 8 or 9, you think it's lots of homework. You do your homework, you have dinner, finish up any homework that's left behind. It's too late to go outside. You don't see a bunch of 8 or 9-year-olds playing outside after dark, right? They're not hanging out. They're in the house, they spend time with the family. When you're 8 or 9 years old, you have a set bedtime, right? 3 and 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds may fight their bedtimes. 8 or 9-year-olds don't fight their bedtimes. They know they have to go to bed. 8 or 9-year-old goes to their room, parents stop by their room, say, good night, I love you, turn off the lights. They can still get tucked in a little bit. When you're 8 or 9 years old, you do not worry about the mortgage or the rent. Safety of the house is taken care of for you. Somebody wakes up in time to go to school. Clothes are laid out for you. Somebody gives you breakfast. Somebody checks your homework for you, right? Somebody takes you to school. How old do 8 or 9-year-old people sleep? They go to bed feeling safe, comfortable, and loved. They have serenity in their lives. And I want you to think about your own lives. Do you have serenity when you go to sleep at night? Or is going to sleep a hassle? I got to get this done. I'm not quite done. There's not enough hours. I'm reading till the lines get blurry. I'm crashing, and now this baby's coming. Oh, I'm going to do this, right? You're juggling all these things. You really want to get that sense of serenity in your own life, and you also want to instill into your own kids, right? You want sleep to be the most peaceful thing in the world. Why? You've all been told that you want to give your babies and your children routines, right? Routines. How many of you heard about routines? Routines, 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 routines. Why do we want to give these kids routines? What's the science behind the routines? You guys know? It's because routines are boring. They're monotonous. And monotony unmasks sleepiness. If sleepiness is the most dangerous thing you can do, you will sleep best when you're in a boring state. If I'm putting you to sleep right now, it's okay. I don't mind. I put many people to sleep. Okay? Okay? But if I put you to sleep, it's because you showed up here sleep deprived. And you're thinking everything is okay, nothing, I'm not going to miss anything important, it's just fine, off I go. Okay, that's okay. But the kids fall asleep when the routines are boring to them. I saw a kid, I think a 4-year-old, who was having trouble sleeping through the night, family from Atherton many years ago. And that kid was sleeping through the night. They had a routine. The routine is he had to brush his teeth before going to bed, but he had to have his teeth inspected by the father, who was really hard-nosed about how to get the teeth cleaned. So now, as bedtime came along, it was this tension about brushing my teeth properly to please my father. So not all routines are pleasant. Okay, why are you laughing? I'm just curious. Have you?
I work in Menlo Park, so I work in Atherton.
So you think, okay, but it could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be that family. It could be any family. I mean, there are strict parents everywhere. But the point is for the routine to be pleasant. And that's why we want these routines. Think about something that you enjoy. Okay? If you hate reading that same book all the time, then it's a hassle. The kid picks that vibe. Do something that you like in the routine. You get to do it together. You get to spend time with your child, right? That's how you want to think of it, not as a chore. I just saw a 6-year-old with some mild autistic-like behavior, positive sleep test, mild tonsils taken out, didn't like CPAP, had these issues. The active duty military family, the dad's overseas. Mom has these 2 kids, an 11-year-old who couldn't be bothered to deal with her 6-year-old sister. In fact, when I walked into the room, they're arguing over the iPad. They can tell these kids don't like each other, right? When I started talking about the routine and the situation, the mom said, when I first walk in, the kids are arguing, and then the bigger sister wins the physical fight to keep the iPad. Now the 6-year-old takes some markers and starts writing, and the mother says, don't write on yourself. She's writing on a piece of paper. She goes, don't write on yourself. And as soon as the mother says, don't write on yourself, the kid starts writing on her arm in front of me. And I'm like, okay, why is this child disrespecting the mother in front of a stranger? Right? Why is this kid doing this, right? Why is they testing their borders that way, right? The boundaries. So I found that interesting, just observing this. This is as you just open the door and walk in, as you're seeing this. And now the mom says, my kid can't sleep, what are you going to give him? Right? So we have to talk about the routine and what happens in the evening. And we talked about it. Turns out the mom said that through the routine, she's describing it, because she takes a bath every other day. And I said, wait, why every other day? She hates her baths. I'm like, okay. So after the bath, so in the evening, we have a bath. After homework and everything's over, she has to have a bath every other day. And then we go to my room and we cuddle. She likes the cuddling. So that's sweet. That sounds good. You cuddle with mom. Yeah, and then she has to go brush her teeth. She hates brushing her teeth. And then she's got to go to her room. And the 11-year-old only pipes up to say that she gets an extra 15 minutes of watching TV that the 6-year-old doesn't get. Okay? So what do I do, right? So I'm not going to prescribe any medication. It's a complicated situation. First thing is, let's change these routines. If the bath times are a hassle at night, I want nighttime to be a time of serenity, right? So let's do the baths as soon as you come home from school. Who cares if the baths are So now you get that fight over with. You want dinner? Okay, cool. Take your bath and you can have dinner. Okay, right? This is what we're going to do. We're just going to get that out of the way. Second is you're going to brush your teeth before you cuddle. Right? Well, you have to brush, because how come this kid who has this fight with the mom, get attention, the dad's away, has to have this hassle thing after she's just been cuddling and finally settling down, knowing that when she's settling down, she's going to have the tension building and she's going to have to go brush her teeth, which she doesn't want to do, right? So let's just brush your teeth after dinner, right? And then now we're going to cuddle, and we're going to cuddle in her room. What? Yes, Mom, you're going to cuddle in her room. Why do you have to cuddle? And why make your bedroom the cool place to be, right? And then he cast off, right? So we're going to change this. So now the 6-year-old's getting kind of annoyed at me because I'm changing all these things, right? So now I'm the evil person changing things. And the mom's kind of overwhelmed with these kids. And I said to him, but in exchange for doing all of this, I told the 6-year-old, you get to go to bed at the same time your older sister does. Give her a later bedtime. That's what we're going to do. There's no reason why 6-year-old and 11-year-old have different bedtimes. There's no biological reason they have to have different bedtimes, right? They need about the same amount of sleep. They may have different interests in life, but the biological need for sleep is the same. So you can imagine, if they were fighting over that iPad in front of me, I'm sure at home at night, she's like, nah, you got to go to bed and I get to watch TV an extra 15 minutes, right, with the stop clock. Stop that nonsense. Make them go to bed together, okay? And that's some of the dynamics you want to go through, okay? So I just want to illustrate that, the contrast of sanctuary in a real world case I had to deal with just recently. We're going to talk about babies. We should touch a little bit on SIDS. I'm sure you're getting a lot of SIDS information already. Super serious. Today, I was interviewed by somebody about pillows. And there's actually very little science about pillows. The only thing I can think of, there's only a couple of 2 or 3 facts on pillows I can think of, and one of them is no pillows in the cribs. When my kids were born, they used to still have pillows in the bed. And you would get these little decorative pillows that they would be handmade for your kid. Now there's no bed, no pillows in the cribs anymore. And you want to put your babies on their back, right, to sleep as much as you can. So there's no denying this power of sleeping. It's close to 8, and I want to finish up soon so I can do some Q&A with you guys. But if your kids are going to play this game, right, my kid won't sleep. When the parents say my kid won't sleep, to me, I always say, yes, he does. Yes, she does. Of course the kid sleeps. All your kids sleep. They're sleeping right now, some of them, right? Even inside you, right? Of course that kid sleeps. What happens is the kid's not sleeping when you want the kid to sleep. That's a separate issue. But if you're going to play this game with me about who's going to stay awake more hours, the adult should always win, right? It's like a kid says, I want to hold my breath until I get what I want. Go ahead. I'm going to stay awake till I get what I want. Go ahead. We do it every night at the sleep lab. Stay awake. Knock yourself out. They knock themselves out is what happens, okay? So a little bit of data on normal babies for you guys. This is actually longitudinal, that means long-term study, 400 kids, close to 500, and they studied them at 1 month, 3 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18, 24 months. Then they did it every year until they were 16. And found that the average baby slept around 14 hours. Some slept 16, some slept 12, on average. That's 1 standard deviation. Those of you who know statistics, this could be 2 standard deviations. So if you look at the actual curve, the curve's like this. It looks like a funnel. And if you look here, these are all normal kids. These were measured at age 16, they were all normal, okay? But some kids were born and only slept 9 hours, less than 9 hours at 1 month, and some slept 18. The ones who slept 18, the parents think my kid's going to grow up to be dumb, right? Something is wrong. The ones who slept 9 think something's wrong, right? They all turn out to be normal. A common question people will ask when they bring a child to see me is, if they have a sleep problem, they want to know if it's a behavioral issue or it's a physical issue. There are physical disorders of kids. Heartburn, for example, can mess up a kid's sleep. Allergies can mess up how a kid sleeps. Snoring, there are physical things that can disturb how a child sleeps, okay? They want to ask about, is it a physical problem or a behavioral issue? So if you were to come to me and say, I don't know if there's a physical behavioral issue, so it's very simple to tell them apart. If your child is sleeping poorly, waking up a lot at night, and if it's a behavioral issue, if you bring the kid to bed with you, and let the child sleep with you from the beginning of the night, not in the middle of the night. Start the night together, wake up together. Co-sleep, bed share, however you want to use the term. If the kid sleeps with you for a few nights in a row, because the first night is kind of a weird night for them, if they sleep just fine when they're with you, but they sleep poorly when they're away from you, then it's more likely to be a behavioral issue. If the kid sleeps poorly when they're with you, the parents say, oh, well, I wish we could sleep with him, but he's all over the place, he's moving too much, he's kicking, he's not comfortable. Then it's more likely to be a physical issue. And if they say it's kind of better when he's with us, but not completely better, then it may be a combination. Now, some parents will say, well, we never sleep with our child. They're looking like they're indignant. How dare you suggest that we sleep with our child? And I'm like, oh, really? Did you get a kid a separate hotel room when you traveled? You know, the parents have to sometimes think a little bit about when they visited relatives. Then they were sharing a bed at some point. And the term co-sleeping is not quite accurate. It's more bed sharing, right? Because even people who say that they co-sleep, if the kid's sleeping 16 hours, the adult's not sleeping 16 hours. They may fall asleep with the child, then get up and leave the child in that bed for a while, and then come back to the bed later. They're bed sharing, right? And where a child sleeps is completely cultural. It'll depend a little bit on how the parents are raised. We have a lot of families here that are different cultural backgrounds. It's not uncommon for many cultures for people to share the bed. My wife slept with her parents, I think until she was 12. That was the situation they were in. They had a one bedroom. So it was very cultural, and you have to get a little bit into that with them. But anyway, that's an idea of normal sleep for you. There are different kinds of sleep that babies get into. Active sleep, quiet sleep. Active sleep is what dreaming is. You've heard of dreaming sleep, or REM? That's actually active sleep. And these are the brainwave patterns. I'm not going to spend time on this. I want to save you some of this. But people are curious about dreaming. Yes, your babies do dream. And they dream about half the time that they're sleeping, right? And the first time I gave a lecture in California, I come from New York, as they said earlier. When I gave a lecture and I told them that about half the time that a baby is sleeping, they're dreaming. And I said, nobody knows what they're dreaming about. A mother raised her hand in the back and said, they're dreaming about their past lives. I'm like, maybe. As I'm in California now, I thought, this is it. Okay, you don't know, okay? But they're laying down synapse. Something is happening. But babies actually dream more percent of total sleep time and total sleeping time more when they're babies than when they're older. And then they later replace time on dreaming for time awake, almost on a one-to-one. So the total non-dreaming or quiet sleep stays the same, but the percents change because they start sleeping less. But they have this stuff going on right away. Their eyes are moving around. In fact, you can look at your babies, and actually, some of you when you start nursing, just a little tip about nursing. Babies can suck in their sleep, but they can't swallow, okay? So, because sucking is a reflex. So you may have the baby latched on and think, okay, the baby is asleep, not fell asleep at your breast, and like, I'm gonna let the baby go to bed now, take him off, and the baby starts sucking again. Oh no, he's still hungry. No, he's not hungry. That's a reflex, okay? And what happens is you kind of overfill the tank, like at the gas station, and it spills over, and then the milk pours out of their mouth later, because they really can't swallow when they're sleeping. And that's what's happening. That's why they spit up on you and stuff. Okay? They can swallow and they're awake, but they can suck in their sleep. Right? So that's what's happening with that. But if you watch them fall asleep, because babies' eyes are so big relative to the size of their skulls, you can see them going into dreaming sleep. They start moving, their eyes start darting in the back of their heads. You can see the actual eye movements. And they breathe a little bit faster and a little bit irregular. When in the quiet sleep, the breathing is very regular, very predictable. But when you start to dream, the breathing goes a little bit crazy. The eyes start to dart around, and they may start smiling and grimacing, making kind of stuff. They're dreaming. They're doing it. Different sleep stages. The main thing to show you about this slide, as I already said, is that we wake up about every hour and a half as adults, and babies wake up about every 60 minutes. Babies are supposed to wake up every hour. That's natural. It's where they can fall asleep on their own. And on top of this, there's this drive to sleep, and there's also this timing to sleep. By the time they're 3 weeks old, they start to have a rhythm that coincides with the Earth's rotation. The babies are sinking into us. Babies are born eating on demand and sleeping on demand. Eating randomly, sleeping randomly. And over time, you impose a rhythm on them, right? You impose this rhythm on them. So if you guys were working nights and sleeping daytimes, you'd have babies in that same pattern. Babies have to adapt to you. They have to, because that's how the brain works. As humans, biological clock in our heads adapts to the outside world. We adapt to the light cycle, our work, our social interactions. Babies have to adapt to us. So if you let your baby sleep randomly, it'll continue doing so. You can actually start setting up rhythms on them if you want. You can guide them in that direction. You can teach them how to sleep within reason. People say, well, how soon, right? And that really depends a little bit. But usually as a rule, 2 to 3 months is your earliest time. You're going to really start tweaking that if they're full term. If they're premature, you're actually correct for that. It's a very important point to me that the need for sleep is biological. The way you sleep is learned. And this is just like food. There's a lot of parallels to sleeping and food. They're both vegetative states. All newborn babies throughout the world drink milk. 5-year-olds throughout the world have different diets. Their diets reflect their culture, right? But babies, same way. All newborn babies sleep a certain way. but the way they sleep is cultural. You've been taught how to sleep. You're going to teach your kids how to sleep, and you yourselves have learned how to sleep. Those of you who have regular bed partners, right? You got your partner has their side of the bed, your partner has their side, you have your side, right? You ever switch sides for the hell of it? No, right? You don't do that. When you travel, you already, when you first start dating, you mention the sides of the bed, okay? Once you've been a couple for a while, there's nothing to talk about. You know what your side is, and the partner knows what their side's going to be. And what I've learned is I talk a lot with adults. The only time adults change sides is when they're much older, and they have a deal between the two of them. One of them sleeps closer to the bathroom. The other want to walk around. So the only time you start changing the bed, your sleeping position, is when you have to start going to the bathroom, okay? But so there are these patterns to sleep that we get into. If you just rotate your body where your pillow goes, you're going to feel completely weird, right? You learn how to sleep. And also, early on in any couple you meet, when you first start your relationship, you have to be sleep compatible. One of you sleeps different than the other. You figured out among yourselves who sleeps lighter than who needs more sleep than who, right? One of you knows you sleep a little bit less than the other. What I find is when I see insomniacs, hardcore insomniacs do not pair off with other insomniacs. Whenever I see one insomniac, I know that their partner sleeps fine, because insomniacs can't put up with other insomniacs in their bed. They get mad at each other. They don't stick together. But one of you sleeps lighter than the other person. And what's going to happen, if it hasn't happened already, is the one who is the deep sleeper, when they hear the baby cry, they wake up and quickly close their eyes and pretend they're sleeping and wait. Has it happened? The light sleeper knows this bum's not getting up, so I might as well take care of it right away. Or you have a situation where one of you were both working, and one of you gave up your salary, right? So now the one who's working has to not have the sleep interrupted because they have to go to work. So now it's up to the person who is staying home to somehow protect the sleep of this person who's got to go to work, plus take care of my own sleep, plus take care of the sleep of this baby. And it gets hard sometimes, right? And then when it works, everything is just fine. But when it doesn't pan out, people get very resentful. Because remember what happens when you don't get enough sleep? I mentioned it earlier. You get irritable. And now it becomes, you get to go to sleep. You get to go to work, okay? You get to stay home, right? And what does that mean? Oh, yeah, you get to stay home. Well, I'm stuck with this kid all day long, right? And how does that play out? So you see a lot of dynamics with that. But most of the time, this works out fine, so don't worry. It's going to be okay. But think with your little kids, especially when you deal with 2- and 3-year-olds. What is the motivation to go to bed? What is the motivation to get out of bed? Right? Because if the kid, especially if you have more than one child, right? If you've got this 3- or 4-year-old that has to go to a separate room, and you have this newborn that's going to be staying with the mom, the 3- or 4-year-old is going to be kind of like annoyed about all this, right? What's their incentive in all this? Well, what am I getting out of this? You get to have a brother, like big deal, right? They're like, he's no fun. He's no fun to play with, right? So always take a moment to think about, from the perspective of the person who has this issue, what is their incentive to go to sleep? What is their incentive to get out of bed, okay? My laptop got unplugged, so I'm worried it's going to die. These are the behavioral issues that we deal with. Sleep onset association is what Ferber described, babies learning how to sleep. But the second one is called limit setting disorder. Let me describe limit setting to you, because you're going to come across this. Limit setting is usually when you have a little bit older, like a toddler, 3-year-old, let's say, 4-year-old, can talk. Your baby's going to talk with you someday, right? You're going to have a conversation with this child. You're going to reason with this child, right? So now you want this kid to go to sleep. And you have the kid go to bed, right? And you as a couple, let's say you rented that, you have that R-rated movie you want to watch. You got to wait for the kid to go to sleep so you can finally watch that movie you've been waiting to see, right? Okay? The kid goes to bed. You're set. You put on the movie, and you hear a voice call you. I want a glass of water. You go, okay, no problem. Your parents look at each other. Whose turn is it tonight? It's your turn? Okay. You turn to one parent, go, okay, you bring in the water. Mom walks in. The kid says, I want daddy to give me the water. Mom walks back. Ha ha, your turn. Hands him the water. The daddy walks in with the water, and the kid says, the blue cup, not the red cup. Now you're thinking, what do you want to do with that cup of water at that point, right? The thing is really is that's a limit-setting condition, where the kid is pushing the situation. And then you got to get a sense, yourselves as parents, have a conversation. If you haven't had a conversation yet, you should do it. How were you disciplined yourselves when you were kids, right? What did your parents do to you to discipline you? And how was your partner disciplined? And how are you going to agree? Because if you don't agree on these things, it becomes an issue. Okay, what's okay, what's not okay? Because that's what limit setting comes about, when there's a discrepancy between the couple on how to discipline their kids. In contrast to that, we also have kids that are going to bed too early. They're being sent to bed too early because the kids become a hassle to some degree. And when you send somebody to bed too early, all kids from around 3 or 4 months of age, early on, start getting more alert in the evening. They start perking up in the evening. We do it ourselves. You notice us getting more alert now? You may have been drowsy this afternoon, then you feel kind of hopefully getting a little surge of alertness now. So having the kids go to bed too early also becomes an issue, right? And the easiest way to get them to sleep is having them go to bed a little bit later. Not too much later, but a little bit later. Push them down, push them back a little bit. So there are these ways of dealing with these kids. These are the techniques that we talk about. Unmodified extinction is this idea of letting them cry it out. All of these things work. The question is, what do you as a couple want to do? People say, I don't want my kid to cry. Oh, a newborn parent, I can't tolerate kids crying. I can't put up with kids crying. I don't want my kid to cry at all. Well, really? Okay. So that baby you don't want to cry who's 6 months old, what happens when he's 2 years old and wants to stick a fork in the light socket to see what happens? How much crying do you tolerate before you let him stick a fork in the light socket? Or how much crying do you tolerate before you let him ride his tricycle without a helmet or cross the street without holding hands, right? It's not that we want them to cry. We don't want them to cry. We love our kids, right? It's simply that it's simply crying is how they communicate. They're not happy with something, and you're trying to teach them. And you tend to see that kids, if within reason, they tend to only whine about things that they think are negotiable, right? If it's not negotiable, they kind of learn because they have short attention spans. A kid can be crying, and I learned this when I was doing general pediatrics. You give a kid a needle, they start screaming. You show them something shiny, they go, oh, and off they stop crying. They're very distractible. And use that short attention span in your favor, okay? When they're crying, upset, just distract them. They don't want to be upset. Sometimes I find the simplest thing you can do when your kid is crying, let's say the kid is in a crib or in a bassinet next to you, and they're crying, and you're thinking, what am I going to do? Remember the example of the flight attendant in the plane, that now this is your job to what to do? Sometimes the easiest thing you can do when your kid is crying is for you to calm down yourself. Put your head down on the pillow, next to, or not pillow, on the mattress next to your child. Pretend you're sleeping. Close your eyes and wait. The more you calm yourself down, the baby's got to stop crying to like see what you're up to. They'll start crying too, right? Because if you're upset, they get upset, and then they feed off each other. Your kid's crying, and you just calm yourself down, put your head next to them, and wait. You'll see eventually they'll stop. They usually do. If it's just a behavioral thing. If they're sick, then it's different. They have a fever, ear infection, then you're going to deal with it differently. But if it's just that they're upset, they're a little stressed, calm yourself down, and they will reflect that with you. So that's the idea of the crying out. It works, but a lot of people don't like putting up with it. The gradual extinction is like you let them cry out for intervals. You've seen these grids, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and that works if you want to put up with it, okay? But that works. That's a completely doable thing. But again, as a couple, agree with yourselves that you're going to do this, okay? And I'm talking about couples. There are families here who have grandparents in them. And with our kids, I told you a little about them. My mother-in-law lived with us for 9 years. And if my wife and I are both sleep doctors, and my kid's crying, I'm like, let him cry it out. And then my mother-in-law would say, no, I can't. You know, it hurts my heart to hear him cry. She scoops him up. She's undermining you, right? So you got to decide. You're going to pick your battles with the grandmother, with the kid. So you have to talk a little bit about these things. You're going to decide. It's not the end of the world. Like, listen, you don't want the kid to cry? Let him sleep with you. Okay, that's fine. Let him sleep with the grandparents. It makes the grandparents happy. That's all right. In some families, you got to decide. But don't tell me you're going to put them in the crib and only pick them up when you want to, right? So you guys work that out as families. The technique that seems to be kind of the most common, the most scientifically based is this idea of, it's a mouthful. Positive routines with faded bedtime with response cost. Simply what it means is you make going to bed pleasurable, not a chore. You go to bed a little, if not a kid who's not sleeping through the night, you let them go to bed a little bit later, okay? And you just make it a little bit more pleasurable. And if they start waking up and not sleeping, you take them away from the bed and wait for them to get sleepy. Don't let them sleep anywhere else. When they start drowsy, getting yawning, put them back in the bed. That's what the faded response costs are. You want to sleep only there. You want to always make the bedroom sanctuary. When they get older, we don't punish our kids by sending them to their rooms. Think about how we deal with kids, okay? If you're a good boy, you can stay up late tonight. And if you're a bad boy, you go to your room, okay? And now we have teenagers that want to stay up all the time. You don't want to do that, right? You want to make the bedroom sanctuary for them. So that's kind of the idea behind this. As far as medications, a lot of people will give their kids all kinds of things. Some people ask, what's the longest I can go without feeding my child? Right? Because the most common reason a baby wakes up at night is because they're still being fed at night. and you kind of torn a little bit. You want to nurse for a full year if you can, right? It'd be great. At the same time, when do they no longer need food at night? Their livers are mature enough by the time they're about 2 months old to go through the night without food. So they can go without food for starting around 2 months, biologically. They may not be emotionally prepared for it, but biologically they can. The best thing you can do as a parent is when they're around 2 months of age, pay attention to the longest sleep they ever get. Let's say the day they get their shots, the kid wails, screams, and then sleeps for 4 or 5 hours. Okay? Just see what your own baby did. Okay? What's the longest sleep your baby's ever had? Now use that as your marker. You know your baby can go 6 hours? That one miracle time he went 6 hours of sleep without going to hypoglycemic shock? Cool. That means he does not have to eat for 6 hours. He can do it. His liver's mature enough. Whatever that level was, now you're going to say, okay, when the time comes, after that feeding, you're going to wait that time to feed him again. If he wakes up and cries, we never deny them love, right? We love them unconditionally. You're simply saying it's not time to eat, just teaching them that it's not time to eat. If you want to break this kid from eating at night, that's if you want to, you don't have to, okay? But you can make them stop eating at night. You can impose that on them if you want to, if it's right for the family. You don't have to, but the way to do it is around 2 months of age, then find that interval and then start stretching it out from there. A lot of people will give the kids medication, and people will give the kids like Benadryl, and there've actually been deaths from this. People have put Benadryl inside the milk, and the kids end up with seizures and fatal arrhythmias in daycare centers. Because it's liquid, they can just chug it down their throats. So just be really, know that this doesn't work. Okay, the right approach is not going to be medication with any of these kids that are healthy otherwise. And I think the last thing I want to say is when they get a little bit older, slumber parties. We really shouldn't call them slumber parties either, right? Because the goal is not to sleep, right? A pizza party, you want to eat pizza, but a slumber party is not to sleep. It's staying awake party, right? So just kind of keep that in mind a little bit. Things that will make a kid sleepwalk and have other behavioral issues will be fevers, apnea, stress, other things that can mess up the way the kid sleeps. But we'll talk more about other kids later. So this is, again, I want to finish the talk, and this was the original list of sleep disorders I had. We're going to open up to questions. If there are any of these in particular you want me to talk about, I will. And we'll finish there. Thank you for listening, guys.